Hey guys, in this video I want to cover my technique for painting the coils on a plasma gun, and at the end of the video I will show you how I went about creating the sort of discharge plasma blast effect that we've got on these guys. Right, so that'll be at the end of the video. But again, to begin with the painting technique, there's two schools of thought when painting plasma coils. There's the one on screen right now, which I don't actually do anymore, where the plasma actually lightens up towards the center. So it's obviously darker in the corners, it lightens up in the middle. Right, that's how I used to paint it. Nothing wrong with that, but I've kind of moved on to a different technique where it's kind of the opposite. And what I'm hoping for the other technique is it looks like it's glowing all over rather than just the middle. So I'm going to use my Cadian here for this. And the first stage of this technique is to paint the coils with Baharroth blue. Now, there's a 50-50 chance I've actually said that correctly. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, all I'm going to do is come in here and just paint all these coils carefully with this blue. All right, not much of the first step. So bear with me just a moment and I'll get all this done. There we go. So with the what I'm going to call ice blue now dry, we can move on to the next step, which is going to involve the white scar. Right. So where's my brush? There we go. My white paint, it's not doing so well. It's pretty gunky, but there's enough left in the pot that this will work. So I'm just trying to mix a little bit of it up here. Right. So yeah, we want it pretty thin. You can use water to thin this down, or if you had like the Lamian medium, that would also do the trick. Probably a little bit better if you did. Right. And we want to cover what we have done already with the white. Right. Let it pull into the recesses as well in the corners. It's all going to help. Like that. So yeah, ordinarily you wouldn't want a light colour like this to run all the way into the recesses, sort of butt right up against these bits. It's a bit harder to see with this side of the model. Right. There we go. Right, and then I'm also going to, because it's quite watery, make sure I'm in focus. I'm going to throw it into these areas here, right, as well as the gun barrel, which has been drilled out. So I'm a big advocate for drilling out gun barrels. There's nothing worse than seeing sort of like a big heavy bolter on a, I know, a Lehman Russ, where the end of it is just solid. Right, so drill your gun barrels out, because they're, for weapons like this, it actually helps, I think, a little bit. Right. So we can, if you're worried that you've overspilt a little bit, we can just rub our thumb over it, and that should do the trick. Right. So there we are. I'll see you in a sec. Right, so there we are. That's all dry now. Next step is to go back to the lighter blue here, and you do need a fairly thin brush at this point. Now what we want to try and do is pick out the ridges on the plasma gun's coils. Right? So we want to leave the recesses white and pick out the ridges with the ice blue here, or Baharroth blue rather. It's going to be easier with larger plasma guns. So if you were doing sort of like a plasma cannon on a dreadnought, this will certainly make things easier. This is why we need a fairly small brush. Now if you've got a really small plasma coil that you're doing, just paint lines in that sort of direction, right, like so. He says. Right, so I'm going to start from the outside and work my way in. And in fairness, I'm only really going to do the first couple. Just like this. Actually, he says I'm told a lie. I'm not going to do the first couple. I'm going to at least do the bottom of these other ones, right? So it's pretty difficult to not get the paint in the white recesses at this scale. Try and get that out. There's a bit of a blob of paint in there, right? So it's almost like we've coated it in the ice blue again. We haven't. We've just picked out that, and obviously I'm going to follow that banding around the top and into the other side. So that's the next step. I'm going to quickly do the other side without the camera in front of me, and I'll jump back in a sec. There we go. So that's top and around the other side there as well. Now, as I said, if you are struggling to pick out the tops of the coils, because it is really, really small, I would just paint couple of straight lines on the left with the ice blue, couple of straight lines on the right with the ice blue, and that should be, from a distance, it will do the same sort of effect, especially if you've got like a plasma pistol where it's going to be really hard to highlight those coils, because there's not a lot of definition between the top of the coil and the recess of the coil. So that's that. We're then going to go back to the white scar and water it down again, but this time I'm not going to apply it all over. Look what's left of my white. I need to go into town on the weekend and get a new one. Right, so that's a bit too much. If you've got Lamian medium, it's probably worth using that to water it down, filter it down. I do, but I'm lazy. I can't bother to go and get it out, so the water will do just fine. All right, so not a huge amount of paint on the brush, and I want to go back over the sort of bottom of the coil here, like so. And I'll do the same, he says, the other side. Right, if you hit the sort of the gun casing while you're doing this, don't worry so much, because it will be glowing, so that's quite all right. And then with this as well, if we can try and edge highlight here any areas sort of around the casing that will theoretically be lit up a little bit. That's a small amount of edge highlighting in the white. If you've edge highlighted your gun casing previously, then this will just add to what you've already done. Right, there we are. Very, very simple. So that white is going to dry in a tick. So let's wash the brush out. Right, then we're going to get out the Baharroth blue and the Teclis blue next. And we're going to mix a small amount of this together. Actually, oh, sorry, my Teclis blue needs a shake. So does my Baharroth blue, but it's so dunky now, it's not going to make any difference. Right, so let's pull this forward just a tad. All right, I'm going to just grab a small amount of, let's do it here, small amount of both. Add a bit of water to this, mainly because of my Baharroth blue is so gunky now. Oh, I've got a headache now. So on this, I'm going to leave the first two on the left. Blimey. I don't know whether you've just heard that. The wind has severely picked up. Blimey. House is going to take off in a second. So yeah, I'm going to leave the first two lines with the ice blue, pick out the next two with this shade, and again, 1, 2, it's about here. And then carry that over the top as well. Again, I am definitely hitting the white recesses now. As careful as I'm trying to be, I'm still not fully achieving that. Right, we don't want to pull those lines all the way down into the white that we've just done. right, because we want it glowing. There we go, just like that. Let's try and bring it in. Right, we can close off that now, and then go straight to the Teclis blue. And I now want to paint the rest of these lines in. Right, so just like this, so we're now darkening the middle section. There's definitely a storm brewing. I live right by the coast here in the UK, so I think we do get some terrible weather sometimes in the autumn. I'm trying not to breathe, because I'm trying to do this so precisely. Yeah, I said I'm not doing this as well as I would really like, because it is so difficult to paint the recessed, or not paint the recessed areas on something so small here. So this definitely becomes easier with larger plasma guns. And now what I'm also going to do is just try and, because I want to try and blend this a little bit better. While this is a mixed line, I'm just going to add a little bit of the mid-tone blue here, like so. Then finally, we're going to grab what we got, Kantor blue here. Let's give it a shake. This is the darkest blue, and this is just going to go, stay open please, this is just going to go on the side in the very middle. It's just closed, isn't it? Yep. Where is, I normally have those little brush guards which are great for sticking in the back of paint pot. I don't have one available. Let's just get a knackered brush and throw that in there. There we go, that'll keep it open. I do miss the old Games Workshop paints, the sort of is it the hexagon shaped ones, not the original ones with the screw tops that, you know, would knacker your hand when you try and open them, but the ones that actually had a clip top as well. Right, so we've done about 3 lines right in the center. I'm now going to extend that across the top as well, very carefully. Like so. Right, so there's the basic technique.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Right, hopefully that does look like it's glowing from the inside out. It's hard to really tell on that, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go and get my Contemptor Dreadnought with the plasma cannon and show you that same sort of technique on a larger scale, because I think it probably demonstrates it a little better. Bear with me just a moment. There we go. So it's actually a new day. It didn't take me that long to find this Contemptor Dreadnought, but I did do some corrections on the Cadian, which I'll get to in a second. So the Contemptor plasma cannon, I think it shows the technique off a little easier because obviously its size. It's the same basic technique, but I have changed it since I did this. I painted this about a year or so ago. So obviously with the plasma cannon on the Cadian, the top section of it is visible. So it was kind of getting darker in the top middle and then lighter and then lightest down here. But because this obviously is covered, I had done the technique purely dark at the top, light at the bottom. But it's the same basic principle. But hopefully on a larger size model, no, not the sword, the plasma cannon, there we go. On a larger size model, that looks, or you can see it a little easier, right? There we are. So the Cadian, when I was painting him yesterday and in the last section of the video, I don't think I did a very good job. And I say that, my defense is when I'm doing these videos, the camera is in front of me. I'm trying to pay attention to whether the model is still in shot, whether it's in focus. and I haven't got the same sort of level of attention that I would normally do when I'm painting just on my own. Right? So I have gone back and edited a couple of things. It's still the same sort of technique that I've been using. Right, so you can still follow the same steps, but some of the things that I've corrected is these darkest lines in the Kantor blue. I had only done about 4 of them. I've pulled that out to sort of about here, but let's say the middle Kantor line blue comes down to almost the bottom. The next one doesn't go down as far, and by the time you get here, it's only sort of, say, yay big. Right? So I've pulled the Kantor blue lines out a little bit further. I've also gone back with the white, watered it down quite heavily, and tried applying it into the recesses, because I said yesterday when I was doing this, I wasn't particularly careful. Some of the white lines that I was trying to keep got sort of painted over. So yeah, that was kind of corrected. I also applied a dry brush, a very small dry brush of the Baharroth blue around the edges of the coil and around the end of the gun here. You can just about see the blue around the white here. Mainly, I'd kind of forgotten I did it on the Dreadnought, so that kind of reminded me to do it. But if you were doing this, I would probably do that dry brushing stage after the first whitewash, right? So once you painted it Baharroth blue, you put that first whitewash over it, then I would then do the dry brush before proceeding with the rest of it. I mean, I've got away with it here, but dry brushes can be quite sort of messy and imprecise, so you don't want to sort of catch the work you've already done. And then finally, I added some white dots, you might be able to see, just running across the edges here, right? Just to, you know, I didn't do it on that one, but I thought it might pick it out a little bit, and I'm fairly happy with that. So it's always a learning curve, but that is the painted version of the plasma gun. That's how I would paint plasma coils right now. That might change in the future, but as of today, this is how I've done it. Now I will now move on to the video on the plasma blasts, the Perspex work. I have been filming them kind of at the same time as this, so we're kind of actually going to jump back in time in a second. But yeah, give me a tick and I will show you how I make the Perspex plasma blasts.
The following motion picture has been rated R. Viewer discretion is advised.
Right, there we go. So in this bit of the video, I want to show you how I went about making the plasma blasts that I've got coming out of the Space Marines Hellblaster guns there. So what you're going to need is some Milliput, a lighter, a candle, some clear acrylic rod. This is 3mm Perspex clear rod that I've got off eBay, and some water. Right, it's probably worth saying, because I'm going to light a candle, we can play with fire, that if you're under the age of 18, don't do this at home, don't try this at home. I'm going to add in, you know, I'm going to extend the disclaimer. If you're a human being watching this, don't do this at home. Right? Now, on with the tutorial. So let's move these guys out the way for a sec. So, explaining what we're going to do with all this. The Milliput, I want to mix up a small amount of the putty, and with the end of a paintbrush, dip it in water so it doesn't stick. We're going to make a concave little tool here, right? This is to, when we heat the rod up over the flame, we can put it in there and get the sort of the bulbous ends that I've got on these two at the back. Right, so once we've got that cured, we carry on with the bit. The next bit, the tea light. I have tried doing this with lighters, but it's you're juggling too many things at once. You're trying to hold the lighter on. The tea light or candle is just a useful little thing to have burning away in the background. It's that constant source of heat. So let's just light that. There we are. Now for the rod itself, with water on standby and our little tool, we want to hold it above the flame, not in it, because we don't want to burn the plastic. But we need to hold it just above it until it starts bubbling, really. And you know what, for this, I might hold it directly above the flame. You can see it's already starting to go now. All right, so I don't want it catching fire. There we go, quickly roll it out and throw it in. All right, that's given us, if the camera's going to pick up on it, a rounded end. Now you can quickly put it back in the water to cool it off. It's not so bad. Not too bad. It's kind of mushroomed a little bit round, but we might be able to work with that. When I did these two last year, I had a rod that's sort of like 30 centimeters like this one, and out of the entire rod, those were the only two that I was kind of happy with. So do expect some trial and error here. Don't expect that every single one of them is going to come out fairly well, because it's really random here. But let's crack on. Now we want to heat the shaft. And again, once you start seeing it bend or flex or bubble, you think it's probably almost ready. So I'm going to try and I want to get the bubbles kind of even at least. All right, wet fingers, pull it out, twist it a little bit. All right, I'll pull it and twist it. Pop it. All right, there we go. So it's not bad for a first attempt again. Let's see if I can get it in focus. There we are. So the twist isn't so bad. I think this end bit might not be the best, because we can still see like the clear rod. It's not all sort of deformed. Right, so it's not a bad first attempt, if I don't say so. I might try and correct it now that we've got that by heating up this, just the end bit alone. Yep, not fire. It's hard to try and get rid of. So this is not the simplest technique, nor is it maybe most intelligent thing to be doing. But, you know, there we are. You saw the thumbnail, clicked on it, and this is the rather stupid idea I had the other year. All right, let's go back. Oh, that's better. That's kind of blasted a little bit. Oh, you know what? I'm going to take that last bit off and get rid of it. All right, now he's thinking that all we need to do is really round off that end. So heat that off again. All right, throw it in there. I'm not pushing it down too firmly because I don't really want to mushroom the top of it again. God, that stinks. There you go, health warning. Wear gloves, do it outside. Don't do it ever. I don't know, one of them. All right, it's kind of flat. How big of a brush did I use? Maybe use a smaller brush when you're making your little indents here. Your little Milliput tool. Right, okay, and now I just want to, the end of that is not so bad now, it's rounded, but the rest of it's kind of melted. So let's heat it back up again. All right. Okay, you know what? All right, go on camera, pick up on it. Fingers wet now, right. I just lost it. There we are, right. Yeah, all right. Other than the wind distracting me outside, that's not so bad, right? I mean, it's not very long, but if we think, let's turn it around. We think I've got my Acadian here, that coming out the end of the gun barrel. Let's try and get the angle right. He says as he holds his fingers right over it, but right, that might work. That's a small amount. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on trying to make as many of these as possible, right? Once you're happy with one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, at the narrow point here, I'm just going to clip it off gently, because that would be something that I would just put a very, very small pin into before gluing it into the barrel. So look, there's one small plasma blast. And you know what, if I don't use it for the plasma gun, I might use it for the plasma pistol that I've got in the platoon as well. So that's that. If you think it's a stupid idea, let me know. If you think it's a great idea, let me know. And I will see you in a second with hopefully a selection of plasma blasts to choose from that will give my Acadian the same sort of love and attention that my Space Marines have got. Go on, focus in. There we are. See you in a sec. Right, so last night I sat down thinking I would use probably the whole of the acrylic rod, making several plasma blasts up and then selecting the best out of maybe a bad bunch that I could pin into the end of this guy's rifle. But maybe it was a bit of luck. I did 3 in a row that turned out fairly well as far as I could tell. There we go, got her in the end. So that's not so bad, right? I think that would work. And then I did a couple of shorter ones as well. that will work for plasma pistols. So with that in mind, with that running that good luck, let's try it a second time on camera to see if I can do one of these more lengthier ones. So I'm going to heat up the end here till it starts. Nope, not on fire, but because again I did this sort of like a year or so ago, so I'm just going to gently push that in there and sort of rotate it around. Right, it's not so bad. So when I was doing this last night, it's a bit like maybe this is the only analogy that worked for me, but like bowling. Right? I don't bowl that often. Normally you go bowling once every year and a bit. You get 10 bowls or 10 goes, whatever it is at bowling. The first few shots, terrible. By the time you start remembering how you do it and you're starting to hit spares and strikes, the game's over, and then you don't do it for a year or so, and then it starts again. It's similar to these. I had done those, I don't know, about a year ago. I was doing it on camera yesterday for the first time in ages. I'm thinking, how would I do this again? So these gave me the little bit of confidence that maybe, or practice, that I needed. So let's try and heat this up. I'm starting to look for those bubbles again. I'm rotating it as I'm doing it so it doesn't just heat one side. Right, now that that's starting to bubble, let's move down. Right, it's popping a little. Let's get some fingers. Right, so I'm kind of spinning it and stretching it as I go. It's cooling down pretty quickly as I do this, so my fingers can be on it longer. Right. There you go. That's not so bad. Probably just need to heat the last bit and stretch it out thin. Right, and now because the end of it isn't going to be so hot, I can hold it without sort of water on my fingers. Let's try and hold it upside down so gravity kind of helps it set straight. There we go. It's difficult for the cameras to pick up on this.
2 hours later.
There we are. Took me longer than I'd like to admit to get that in focus, right? So that, I think once I clip it off, maybe, right, here-ish, right, that will work quite well for this guy's plasma gun. Like so, yeah, cool. So that's how you do it. Yesterday was a trial run. I think I got better overnight, just remembering little bits and pieces, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to clip that off. I'm going to pin it to the end of this guy's gun very carefully, because we've got to be very, very careful pinning these. But luckily the hole's kind of already drilled in his rifle. And then I will show you a couple of last little steps that I do with some thin washes, just to bring some colour back into this, because it's still quite clear. I mean, if you were painting your plasma guns like a green, which I have done before, you can get neon green acrylic rod that's far brighter than this. It's a bit like those packs of highlighters you can get where the magenta, orange, yellow, green is super bright, but the blue is like bootleg version. I will, see you in a second and get the last couple of paints out. There we go, all pinned in place. And I'm actually going to introduce you to the lieutenant now, that I've used one of these smaller plasma blasts. Let's get him in focus. There he is. Pretty happy with how that's turned out. Prizes for, well, actually there's not going to be any prizes. There's going to be a like reaction for anyone who guesses the theme of my Cadians. Right? You know, hopefully the orange visor and chainsword might give it away there a little bit. But onto obviously the Cadian we've been working on. So let's make sure. There we go, he's in focus. So the pinning is a pain. Right? I'm not going to lie. The plastic that this is acrylic. It's very, very brittle, and we have just introduced bubbles and twists into it. So I did aim on pinning this into a much thinner part of the Perspex, but in the end, because the pin vise just kept breaking the sides of what I was drilling into, we're talking about something as thin as these, it's just not going to work. So I've ended up pinning it in place further into the blast than I originally set out to, but in the end, I'm not too concerned. But there is one last thing that I will do to these plasma blasts, and that's to try and add a little bit of colour into the Perspex. So the two paints I'm going to use are Nihilakh Oxide, right, and Guilliman's Glaze. Now, I'll appreciate Guilliman's Glaze is discontinued now, which is really unfortunate because I did really like the glazes. I think they worked really, really well. So while I'm going to use this on my models, I'm also going to test the contrast blue on one of these spare blasts to see if it has the same sort of effect. Now, I'm not a massive fan of the contrast paints. They seem to rub off the model when you're holding it faster than a Barocca would dissolve outside.
He thinks they dissolve in the rain like a Barocca. What an idiot.
Right, so it's worth bearing in mind that if you're using the contrast paints, have some varnish to hand. So as soon as it's dry, apply some varnish. I've got the technical hard coat because it doesn't matter if it's shiny in this example, but you might want a matte varnish as well. So the reason the Nihilakh Oxide is used, because I think it adds a nice little sort of turquoisey base, but as you can see in here, might be more prevalent that side, you can see the pin, because obviously the plastic's clear. So I want to kind of mask that a little bit. I'm going to use this oxide. I'm going to water it down a tad because it's better to add a thicker coat later on than apply something too thick to begin with that you can't really do much about. So this is going to come from the actual barrel itself around here. It's gonna pull in the recesses anyway, which is absolutely fine. Right, but I'm just trying to add a little bit of colour from the actual barrel itself, and hopefully it just masks the pin as well. Right, so I'll quickly do the same on the plasma pistol. I feel like my hands are shaking more than normal at the moment. It feels like, I know this, if you've been obviously watching this video, you probably heard the wind from previous days. The temperature has dropped. I'm sitting here in my polo shirt thinking I should probably go put a jumper on. Right, but there we are. So yeah, this is purely here to kind of mask the pin a little bit, because it has a slight transparency to it when it dries, but not as much as like the glazes will. So obviously I am trying to hide that pin from the blast. So that's that. There's only a small amount. Mainly it really just covers the length of the pin that you had applied into that. Now, to add some colour to the end of it, I'm going to use the Guilliman's Glaze. It's obviously a blue tone rather than sort of like the turquoisey teal. My pot is not staying open. Again, as I said earlier, I used to have loads of little brush guards, which have obviously all gone walkabouts, but they're really useful for just throwing in the back of these pots, just to keep it open. So let's do the same sort of advice. Let's water it down a little bit, because it's easier to apply a second coat if it's not enough. So I'm going to pick probably the last third of this, just to apply this glaze. Because it's transparent, you don't have to be too precise, because if you painted one side, the other side's probably going to get caught. quite a heavy coat, actually. It's more than I was initially intending to. So let's throw some water in here just to get rid of some of the more prevalent areas. Right, what does that look like? What do we think? Yeah, it's all right. I can live with it. There's this little bit here that I probably want to just get rid of because there was a lot of wash just sat in that bubble, clearly. But I'm fairly happy with that, how that's come out, really. The model itself is kind of pointing downwards, and I think that's a problem with my conversion than anything else, but maybe he's blowing someone's legs out from underneath them. So let's quickly do this guy while we're here. And then we'll test out the contrast paints, see if that has the same sort of effect. I bought the contrast paint. There was this blue one and a green one because a few years ago I got round to my Lizardman cavalry, the Cold One riders, and I hate painting cavalry. It's a pest. It's pain. Don't like doing it. So the shop, the Games Workshop that I went to, they said, oh, this will be easy. You know, you just spray them white or grey or whatever it was, and just apply this wash, and it will get the bulk of it done. And I thought, all right, okay, I'll give it a go, and it did. You know, it did cover it and shade it fairly well, and I thought this will make things easier. And then as I was painting the rest of the model, I kept noticing like the eyebrows of the Cold Ones, like the knuckles, the edges of the model kept going back to grey, and that's when I realised that the paint just comes off on your fingers, even though it's dry. And at the end, I actually turned into a big ordeal. I went in the Games Workshop, I was looking at it, I thought, right, I need to get a varnish, and I couldn't for the life of me remember whether it was Technical Hard Coat or the other one they do. I can't remember which one. Maybe they're out of stock of one. Which one was gloss and which one wasn't? So I asked the guy at the shop, Technical Hard Coat, is that the matte one? He goes, yeah, that's matte. Go home, apply it all over the model, dry shiny. So now I've got shiny Cold One riders that I don't particularly like. So there we are. Let's get back to what we were talking about. So I've got this spare one. Let's give this a go. I'm definitely going to water this down a tad. Well, there we go. Look, I was complaining about how cold it was. Sun's come out. So right then. Let's see. I think it's a slightly different hue, right? And I'm wondering whether this would work better if I was ever bothered to go and get my Lamian medium out. Maybe it would. Right, see if I can get it into focus in a timely manner. The answer was no. I couldn't get it to focus in a timely manner, but there we are anyway. So, yeah, I'd say the contrast paints work in this regard. I think it will do the trick. As I said at the end, once this was dry, if I was using this, I would apply the a technical Ardcoat on it just to make sure that it's sealed in there. So there we have it. That is the, could say it's genius, could say it's madness, the technique for making plasma blasts using a candle and some acrylic rod. I will throw up some still images of these guys at the end of the video, probably combined with the Space Marines that I had earlier on, if anyone wants to take a closer look. But thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, let me know. If you're going to try it, let me know. I'd like to see, obviously, images and whatnot. So, you know, if you have done something similar, you can find my Instagram profile via my website that will be in the description of this post. Follow me, drop me a tag, and I'd love to see what anyone else is doing with it. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this content, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.